So, hallo und herzlich willkommen in der Stadtbibliothek Stuttgart. Ich bin der Tobias Wengert. Ich organisiere hier das Programm für Erwachsene. Ja, ist tatsächlich so. Also Lesung, nein, also in Abgrenzung zu Kindern. Heute ist ein ganz besonderer Gast bei uns hier, der Ted Williams. Er hat einen ganz besonderen Bezug auch zu Stuttgart. Er war schon ziemlich oft hier und kommt auch immer wieder gerne. Hier ist sein Verlag, Klett-Cotta. Und es freut mich ganz besonders, dass wir ihn heute hier in der Stadtbibliothek begrüßen können. Außerdem ist der Björn Springorum hier. Das ist der Moderator, der macht ziemlich oft hier Moderationen, auch ganz toll. Das freut mich, den möchte ich auch begrüßen. Und wir haben den Sebastian Barnik hier. Der wird nachher, es gibt eine Überraschung, da wird er einen Text von Ted Williams musikalisch interpretieren, kann man das so sagen? Ja. Und außerdem ist die Barbara Stoll hier, die wird auf Deutsch lesen, das macht sie auch ganz großartig. Die Dragon Days sind ein Festival und ich bedanke mich auch beim Dragon Days Festival, dass sie das möglich gemacht haben mit Ted Williams. Im Hintergrund laufen schon ein paar Bilder, also das Festival hat schon begonnen vor 2 Tagen und da bekommt man so ein bisschen Eindrücke, was bis jetzt so gelaufen ist. Es gibt draußen auch diese Broschüre, wo das Festival ein bisschen beschrieben ist und wo man so einen Eindruck bekommt, was das Festival eigentlich macht. Als nächstes möchte ich den Ernst Oliver Wilhelm auf die Bühne bitten. Das ist so, dass das Dragon Days Festival einen Kurzgeschichtenpreis dieses Jahr zum ersten Mal ausgelobt hat, wo es um Datenschutz unter dystopischen Gesichtspunkten geht. Und wir haben also uns das so gedacht, dass als Einstieg heute der beste Wettbewerbsbeitrag, die beste Kurzgeschichte kurz vorgestellt wird. Aber der Ernst Oliver Wilhelm der war Teil der Jury und wird da jetzt ganz kurz drauf eingehen und erklären, worum es dabei ging. Ich wünsche Ihnen ganz besonders viel Spaß heute mit Ted Williams und holen Sie unser Veranstaltungsprogramm und gucken Sie mal, wir machen ganz tolle andere Veranstaltungen auch hier. Also, viel Spaß.
Ja, vielen Dank also an die Dragon Days, die ja wirklich sehr stark mitgeholfen haben, diese Idee zu verwirklichen von einem Kurzgeschichtenwettbewerb zum Thema Datenschutz. Das Thema Datenschutz ist ja manchmal ein bisschen schwergängig, das wird ja von technischen und rechtlichen Themen dominiert und manchmal ist es ein bisschen schwer, sage ich mal, dieses Thema so an die Menschen heranzutransportieren, die es eigentlich angeht. Und die Idee, die ich dann mit den Dragon Days entwickelt habe, war, wie wäre es denn, wenn wir tatsächlich Geschichten nutzen, um dieses Thema ja, aufzubereiten und tatsächlich auch eine emotionale Bewegung mit dem Thema auszulösen. Und natürlich hat uns was vorgeschwebt. Wir hätten natürlich gerne sowas wie 1984 gehabt, so einen Meilenstein der Literaturgeschichte. Aber das war uns erstmal eine Nummer zu groß. Deswegen haben wir jetzt erstmal angefangen mit Kurzgeschichten. Die kann man auch leichter als Jury verdauen. Ja, wir haben also einige Geschichten uns vorgenommen. Also ich bin eines von 3 Jurymitgliedern. Ich bin der Datenschützer. Dann haben wir noch den Sebastian Pilling, der ist Lektor bei Heine für Science Fiction und Fantasy. Dann haben wir auch einen Science Fiction und Fantasy Autor, den Bernd Perplis. Das heißt also, da ist geballte Kompetenz in der Jury vertreten und wir haben uns nach langem Hin und Her haben wir uns wirklich auf eine Geschichte geeinigt. Also alle Geschichten, die eingereicht wurden, waren wirklich spitze. Also wirklich da ist wirklich mit Haaresbreite diese Geschichte, die wir heute dann auch von der Barbara vorgelesen bekommen, ja, hat sich als Sieger herauskristallisiert. Und warum? Naja, zum einen ist sie sehr humorvoll. Also Humor ist sicherlich immer auch ein guter Weg, ja, eine Botschaft zu transportieren, also nicht mit so einem erhobenen Zeigefinger, sondern tatsächlich Humor öffnet alle Sinne. Und es ist auch am Ende eine, ja, wie soll ich sagen, ein kleiner Spin in der Geschichte, die wir also ganz fantastisch finden. Und sie lässt sich auch vor allen Dingen jetzt hier in der Dragon Day Community natürlich sehr gut vortragen, weil da, glaube ich, ein paar nette ja, Hommagen an, sage ich jetzt mal, kulturelle Elemente drin sind, die Sie alle kennen. Ja, damit möchte ich eigentlich auch schon meine kurze Laudatio auf diese Geschichte von dem Marcel Durer beenden und gleich das Wort an die Vorleserin, die Barbara, weitergeben. Danke, Barbara.
Omnes GmbH. Die Worte Wissen ist Macht stehen in goldenen Lettern über dem Eingang der Eingangshalle. Sie sind der Leitsatz für die Omnis GmbH, ein Informationsunternehmen und mein Arbeitgeber. Wie viele meiner Kollegen auch, versuche ich noch einen Platz in einem der überfüllten Aufzüge zu erhaschen. Ein ganz normaler Arbeitstag. Ich arbeite seit nunmehr 3 Jahren bei Omnis und bin glücklich mit meiner Position im Service. Meine Aufgabe ist es, Kundenanfragen zu bearbeiten, da jeder, der bei uns anruft, ganz unterschiedliche Bedürfnisse hat, auf die man individuell eingehen muss, wird es nie langweilig. Außerdem ist die Bezahlung ganz ordentlich. Die Omnis GmbH war wahrscheinlich das Unternehmen, welches von der digitalen Revolution der Welten am meisten profitiert hat. Wir wissen, wie wir Informationen sammeln und auswerten können, um jede Anfrage unseres Klientels zu beantworten. Mit all den Daten, die uns zur Verfügung stehen, ist es eigentlich nur eine Frage der Kreativität des jeweiligen Sachbearbeiters, wie er zur Lösung des Problems gelangt. Ich sitze also in meinem Büro, gehe ein paar E-Mails durch und trinke eine dampfende Tasse schwarzen Kaffee, als plötzlich das Telefon klingelt. Der erste Auftrag des Tags. Ich setze das Headset auf und drücke den großen, aufgeregt blinkenden Knopf. Guten Tag und herzlich willkommen bei der Omnis GmbH. Wie kann ich Ihnen behilflich sein? Hey, Land, Beutlin! Könnten Sie Ihre Anfrage eventuell etwas spezifizieren? Beutlin! Nun gut, vielleicht reichen mir diese Angaben auch bereits. Bitte haben Sie einen Moment Geduld. Meine Finger gleiten flink über die Tasten der Tastatur und geben die Worte Auenland und Beutlin in die Suchmaske ein. Ach, da haben wir doch schon ein paar Treffer. Ich habe hier einen Bilbo-Beutlin, aber der hat bereits vor einiger Zeit das Auenland verlassen. Bei TripAdvisor hat er verschiedene Freizeitaktivitäten im Bruchteil mittelmäßig bewertet. Im Auenland hätten wir sonst nur noch gerade die Sackenheim-Beutlins und einen gewissen Frodo-Beutlin. Meinten Sie vielleicht Frodo? Hey, Auenland, Beutlin! Mal sehen. Die letzten Aktivitäten habe ich in einem Gasthaus namens Zum tänzelnden Pony. Dort hat ein gewisser Herr Unterberg eben eingecheckt. Die Payback-Punkte gingen allerdings auf das Konto von Frodo Beutlin. Wenn Sie also schnell sind, werden Sie ihn noch dort finden. Euphorisch kreischt der Kunde am anderen Ende der Leitung. Ja, dann wünsche ich Ihnen viel Erfolg mit diesen Informationen und bedanke mich, dass Sie Omnis gewählt haben. Bitte bleiben Sie dran, ich verbinde Sie nun mit unserer Rechnungsabteilung. Einen schönen Tag noch. Ich lege auf und nehme einen Schluck von meinem Kaffee, der leider inzwischen kalt geworden ist. Moment. Moment. Doch, viel Zeit bleibt mir nicht zum Verschnaufen. Pardon. Da ruft auch schon der nächste Kunde an. Erneut drücke ich den leuchtenden Knopf. Guten Tag und herzlich willkommen bei der Omnis GmbH. Wie kann ich Ihnen behilflich sein? Guten Tag, mein Name ist Laszlo Kirsch. Ich rufe an im Auftrag meines Herrn Glossoraban vom Haus Harkonnen. Es geht um den Aufenthaltsort von Paul Atreides. Zuletzt wurde er gesehen, als er mit einem Ornithopter in einen Sandsturm außerhalb von Arakeen geflogen ist. Noch während er redet, bearbeite ich seine Anfrage. Meine Finger hämmern auf die Tasten ein. Die Wahrscheinlichkeit, dass jemand einen solchen Sandsturm überlebt, sind äußerst gering. Aber mein Herr möchte auf Nummer sicher gehen. Verständlich, verständlich, bestätige ich ihm beiläufig und erläutere ihm dann die Ergebnisse meiner Auswertung. Tatsächlich sind die Social-Media-Accounts von Paul Atreides noch aktiv. Allerdings hat er sich in Muad'Dib umbenannt. Außerdem ist er mehreren radikalen Fremen-Gruppen beigetreten. Es sind zwar geschlossene Gruppen, aber die meisten Mitglieder haben sich auf den Side-Table geliked. Vielleicht haben sie dort Glück. Oh, vielen Dank, vielen Dank. Nicht auszumalen, wie meine Herren reagiert hätten, wenn der totgeglaubte Atreides-Bengel plötzlich mit einer Armee aus radikalen Fremen wieder nach Arakeen zurückkehren würde. Nichts zu danken. Ich wünsche Ihnen viel Erfolg mit diesen Informationen und bedanke mich, dass Sie Omnis gewählt haben. Bitte bleiben Sie dran. Ich verbinde Sie nun mit unserer Rechnungsabteilung. Einen schönen Tag noch. Bis zur Mittagspause bearbeite ich die Gesprächsprotokolle, denn auch die Kundenanfragen bieten Informationen, die man zu einem späteren Zeitpunkt auswerten kann. Und dann ruft auch schon die Mittagspause. In der Kantine gibt es heute Semmelknödel mit Pilzragout und Schweinemedaillons. Leider habe ich nur einen Platz bei den Leuten vom Marketing bekommen. In der Abteilung kenne ich niemanden. Umso mehr kann ich mich also auf mein Essen konzentrieren. Mit der Gabel stochere ich in dem gummiartigen Knödel und in den zu 10 Medaillons herum. Ich freue mich auf den Feierabend. Einmal im Monat macht meine Frau diesen fantastischen Braten mit Kartoffelgratin. Dazu gibt es ein kühles Bier. Ja, und heute ist es soweit. Allein bei dem Gedanken daran läuft mir das Wasser im Munde zusammen. Bei der Rückkehr in mein Büro bekomme ich die volle Wucht des Mittagslochs zu spüren. Müdigkeit macht sich breit, die Augen werden schwer, die Trägheit meines Körpers schläfert mich ein und ich bin kurz vor einem Nickerchen. Das blinkende Licht einer weiteren Kundenanfrage gleicht schon fast einer Erlösung. Ich ohrfeige mich kurz, um wieder wach zu werden und nehme ab. Guten Tag und herzlich willkommen bei der Omnis GmbH. Wie kann ich Ihnen behilflich sein? Ich brauche eine Information. Wenn dies nicht einer unserer Stammkunden wäre, dann hätte ich mir vielleicht Sorgen gemacht. Doch so, guten Tag, Lord Vader. Welche Informationen hätten Sie denn gerne diesmal? Ich brauche den Standort einer Rebellenbasis. Eine Rebellenbasis? Haben Sie mir vielleicht noch ein paar Anhaltspunkte? Erkundige ich mich. Der mechanische Hall der Atmung dominiert für einen kurzen Moment die Leitung. Sie sind Rebellenabschaum. Reicht das? Natürlich reicht das nicht. Also muss ich noch ein wenig tiefer in die Trickkiste greifen. Einen Moment Geduld bitte, Lord Vader. Ich nehme ein Bild einer Rebellenuniform als Referenz für eine gezielte optische Suchanfrage durch Instagram, Twitter und Facebook und grenze den relevanten Veröffentlichungszeitraum ein. Ja, da haben wir schon ein Bild von 3 feiernden Rebellen auf Instagram gefunden. Posieren vor einem abgeschossenen TIE Fighter. Leider haben sie den Ort nicht markiert. Aber ich vergrößere das Bild, um Gewissheit zu haben. Im Hintergrund kann ich eine Sternenkonstellation erkennen. Mittels der Perspektive könnten wir ausrechnen, von welchem Planeten aus man diese Sterne so sehen kann. Und tatsächlich, wir haben einen Gewinner. Ich lasse Ihnen die Koordinaten zukommen, Lord Vader. Ausgezeichnet. Ich wünsche Ihnen viel Erfolg und diese Informationen und bedanke mich, dass Sie Omnis gewählt haben. Bitte bleiben Sie dran, ich verbinde Sie nun mit unserer Rechnungsabteilung. Einen schönen Tag noch. Ein Blick auf die Uhr und ich stelle erleichtert fest, dass ich bereits Feierabend machen könnte. An anderen Tagen würde ich vielleicht Überstunden machen, doch heute habe ich andere Pläne. Ich packe eilig meine Sachen zusammen, stemple mich im Zeiterfassungssystem aus und mache mich auf den Weg zum Fahrstuhl. Mit einem Lächeln auf den Lippen lasse ich, während der Aufzug ins Erdgeschoss fährt, den heutigen Arbeitstag Revue passieren. Ach, ich kann mich wirklich glücklich schätzen, eine so abwechslungsreiche Arbeit zu haben. Ich schlendere durch die Empfangshalle und durch die Drehtür hinaus aus dem Omnis-Gebäude, steige auf dem Personalparkplatz in meinen Wagen und fahre nach Hause. Links von mir brennt das Auenland. Orkhorden plündern und die Nazgul bringen ihrem dunklen Lord Sauron den Ring. Auf der rechten Seite wird auf Arrakis, dem Wüstenplanet, gerade Muad'Dib gekreuzigt, durch die Straßen von Arakeen getragen, um den unterjochten Fremen zu zeigen, was passiert, wenn man sich gegen das Haus Harkonnen auflehnt. Und irgendwo über mir im Orbit zersprengt der Laserstrahl eines Todessterns einen Planeten, weil sich auf ihm eine Rebellenbasis befunden hat. Millionen schreien in panischer Angst auf und verstummen plötzlich. Doch all dem schenke ich keine große Beachtung. In Gedanken bin ich schon zu Hause, wo meine Frau, der leckere Brat mit Kartoffelgratin und das eiskalte Bier auf mich warten. Ach, ich kann mich wirklich glücklich schätzen.
Ja, und dann begrüßen Sie jetzt mit mir nach diesem schönen Auftakt bitte Ted Williams.
Für mich? Ja.
Ja, auch von mir nochmal einen schönen guten Abend hier bei den Dragon Days, 3. Tag, aufregend wie immer. Ted, I guess you didn't understand so much.
Well, it was pretty obvious when Barbara was doing Darth Vader. Even we Americans, as slow as we can be sometimes, we know about evil overlords, you know.
Yeah. Ich möchte noch ganz kurz was zum Ablauf des Programms sagen heute Abend. Wir haben wieder einiges vor. Davor möchte ich aber auch noch die Zuschauer bei LovelyBooks begrüßen. Die scheinen mir gerade zwar ins Gesicht. Da hinten ist die Kamera. Wir haben nämlich einen Livestream heute Abend. Sprich, es werden zwischen 1 und 6 Milliarden Menschen zuschauen. Wird man nachher mal sehen, wie viele. Hello, LovelyBooks. Ted, would you like to welcome the LovelyBooks audience?
Oh, yes, and very much we want to. Sorry, I'm still trying to figure out what I'm reading tonight and where in the book it might be. So, chapter 12, thank you. So, yes, would very much like to welcome the LovelyBooks audience at home and a lovely audience, I'm sure you are.
Very well. Die LovelyBooks-Gemeinde darf gerne während der Lesung, während der Moderation Fragen stellen. Die können wir nachher gerne auch dann noch Ted stellen, wenn es quasi die Fragen aus dem Publikum gibt. Aber davor gibt es erstmal natürlich jede Menge Fragen von mir. Da müssen jetzt alle durch. Zum Ablauf ganz kurz noch. Wir machen eine kurze Fragerunde, Ted und ich. Danach wird Ted eine englische Stelle lesen. Dann wird die Barbara nochmal auf die Bühne kommen und eine deutsche Stelle lesen. Danach wird es ein bisschen Musik geben, wie wir schon gehört haben. Dann nochmal eine kleine Fragerunde von mir und dann eine Fragerunde von Ihnen allen. Und danach natürlich signieren, signieren, signieren. And I'd like to start with Stuttgart, Ted, because, well, this is obviously not the first time you're in this city. I guess it's your 3rd appearance at Dragon Days, and your publisher is here in Stuttgart. So please tell me, what do you make of the city? How do you like it here?
Well, I'm very happy in Stuttgart. I have been fortunate to have seen more of it than I have had a chance to in many German cities. Because, as Björn mentioned, my publishers are here. I have now become a semi-regular at Dragon Days, and thank you. And I'm even becoming a semi-regular at the Stadtbibliothek, because this is now my 3rd visit. So I love the place very much, but I have to say my love and affection for Stuttgart actually started the first time I ever came here. I had at that time an editor, and eine Redakteurin, one would say, at Klett-Cotta, my publishers, named Ulrike Killer, who was a lovely woman and a very fine publisher. So she knew I was coming to visit and to do a tour. And so she said, Tad, I have prepared something just for you. And I said, oh, that's very nice, thinking perhaps a little cupcake, you know, with a candle in it or something. So she took me out into the streets of Stuttgart. This was my very first day in the city. She took me out into the streets of Stuttgart, and apparently, I realized later, where she was taking me to was the Natural History Museum. So we're walking down the road, and she is busily talking to me and keeping me distracted from where we were going. And finally, we came around a corner into a new street, and she said, there you go, Tad, it's your surprise. And there was a giant crane, you know, a building crane, and 60, 70, 80 feet up in the sky, they were flying a giant pterodactyl into the Natural History Museum. Upper windows, because I suppose that's the only place you can get a pterodactyl into the museum, is through the upper windows. So I am standing there, of course, saying, for me? Because it's a beautiful pterodactyl. Mwah! I have seen many pterodactyls all over the world, but the Stuttgart pterodactyl, the best ever. So yes, no, I'm very fond of this city. I say to people, this is my home away from home when I am in Germany. So it's good to be back.
That's very nice to hear. Thank you for that. Natürlich fällt mir jetzt auch gerade auf, dass ich komplett vergessen habe, wahrscheinlich ist es überflüssig, Ted Williams vorzustellen, aber vielleicht gibt es ja doch den einen oder anderen hier, deshalb will ich das noch ganz kurz abhaken auf jeden Fall. Warum ich mich so freue, dass ich heute hier bin, ist eben, ich sitze neben einem der großartigsten Fantasy-Autoren unserer Zeit, der mit seinem neuen Buch in eine der großartigsten Fantasy-Welten unserer Zeit zurückkommt, die, wie wahrscheinlich alle wissen, George R. R. Martin zu Game of Thrones inspiriert hat. Er hätte sich vielleicht auch mal von Teds Produktivität inspirieren lassen können, aber das soll hier nicht zur Sprache kommen. Sorry for that. Going back to fossils, we were just talking about dinosaurs, and it's quite a short way from dinosaurs to dragons. You're quite fond of dragons, and we're at the Dragon Days festival here. You got this nice little model, 3D printed model of a dragon at the Frankfurt Book Fair.
It's a model of Der Drachenbeinthron.
True, yeah.
It's not just a dragon, but
It's not
a
just a
chair made out of a dragon.
That's true, that's true. A very, very important chair in the books. Where will you put it back home?
Well, for those who haven't seen it, it's not really an article of furniture because it's only about this big. However, one of my other visits here to Stuttgart, Dragon Days was very kind to present me with a beautiful bronze Lindwurm. And it is one of the prides of our household, our Stuttgart Lindwurm. And so I suspect the dragon bone chair will stand next to it so that we can show our friends when they come by that when I leave town every now and then and go away for a few weeks, it is not merely to avoid prosecution for legal problems or anything, but because I am actually going to other places in the world where they appreciate me. So.
Well, in your books, dragons play quite an important role in the world of Osten Ard as well as in the Dragons of the Ordinary Farm, for example. But Ted, please tell me, what is your favorite fictional dragon of all times?
Well, that is a very tough call, but I have to go for not just the reasons you would imagine. I have to go with Smaug from Tolkien. Ah, yes, of course. Yeah, Smaug deserves a round of applause. But you know, Benedict Cumberbatch is not the only person who has played the dragon Smaug. No, I have played the dragon Smaug. When I was 15 years old, in what we call the Children's Theater, in the area where I grew up in Palo Alto, in California, we did The Hobbit, and as a play for people. And I had two roles. I will only tell you about Smaug because the other one was minor. And tonight we are only talking about my big things, you know, my important things, my large books, my giant pterodactyl. So as Smaug the dragon, I had a very, very large wooden structure that was the dragon, beautifully made, covered in shiny cloth scales and all of these things that I would go inside. And I had a microphone like this, so I could be the voice, you know, like that. And I also had a smoke machine. Yeah, you know what a smoke machine? This was an early kind of primitive smoke machine, but it was quite good. It worked on linseed oil. Leinsamen, yeah, that's probably right. I don't know. So anyway, so there I would be in my giant dragon, you know, with this huge wooden thing, and it was on wheels. It had to be, because it was the biggest thing on the stage, with my smoke maker. Anyway, one of the days that we were doing the show, I don't know how many of you have been in theater, have been actors in the theater, but traditionally, especially in the theaters I've been in, the Sunday matinee, that's the daytime, the day show, is always the worst, especially in children's theater, because people bring actual children. So the theater was full of these horrible, horrible little Cub Scouts, we would call them, you know, with the stupid little hats and the neckerchiefs, and they were noisy as hell. They were horrible. So they were all in the front row, you know, yap, 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 and they weren't paying attention to the play or anything. So near the end of my scene, I snuck my snuck is not the right word because it was the size of a Volkswagen. But I brought my dragon to the edge of the stage and began gassing them with the smoke, figuring I have about 2 minutes. I can silence them if I really pump hard with the smoke. Unfortunately, I got a little too close to the edge of the stage. There was a horrible scream from all the little Cub Scouts in the front row as this giant wooden dragon went kaboom. But I figured, has to be one of the best Smaug performances ever. Sehr interactive, yeah? So that's, no question, that is my favorite dragon, I guess I have to say.
Well, it is a big and scary dragon, and you showed them. Let's talk about your books now, because, well, after all, that's why we're here in the first place. With The Witchwood Crown, die Hexenholzkrone, you return to the world of Osten Ard. And this is also your return to classical high fantasy, so to say. Did you miss it?
I never think of it that way. Obviously, sometimes, not never, but sometimes I have to think about it because in publishing, we become narrower and narrower, and publishers like to talk about markets, and they like to have an idea of what you are going to publish and how they can get it to the audience with everybody doing the least amount of thinking necessary. Okay? So you don't want them going, what kind of book is this? No, you just make sure they know. This is a high fantasy. This is an epic fantasy. But I don't tend to think of it that way. For me, all the books begin with a story that I want to tell. And only as the story grows do I begin to understand what kind of story that it is. Sometimes it's only characters, sometimes only an idea, and it's only when it gets bigger. So in that sense, it doesn't make so much difference to me. If I love the characters, if I love the story, I don't care what kind of world. And I love making worlds. So as many as possible is what makes me happy. That said, it has been very, very fulfilling and exciting in a way I did not expect to come back to a world that I had created a very, very long time ago, before people lived in cities. And the beasts on wheels rolled through the streets and all those things. I had written these books, and so it was really fun to come back to the characters and see them older, just as it would be with any friends to go see them again in their lives and meet them again and hear what had been happening and all that. So that was really exciting. I loved that. The only bad thing, I have to say, is that when I first began to work on the story, even though I knew I was returning to an earlier thing I had done, for me it was just a story. So I'm just thinking, please, Tad, don't mess up this book. Make it a good book, okay? Just as I do with every book. But once we announced it, once we said, Tad is going to do a new set of books and return to Osten Ard, all of a sudden, because now we have an internet, my life was full of people saying really nice things about the old books and how much they had liked them and how much these books meant to them, and many stories about, I was a teenager, I was a lonely child, I found these books and they meant a lot to me. All the things that I love to hear from people. But I suddenly realized, if I screw up the new books, I'm not just writing bad books, I am ruining thousands of people's childhoods. I am retroactively destroying my old books. So, if you didn't like the new books, please don't tell me. I will be crying all the way on the plane back to America.
Which is a long way.
Oh, yeah.
Right. It has been quite some years since you wrote the first set of books set in that world. It's been 30 years.
And that's amazing because I'm only 35 years old. How did it happen? What a genius child I was.
Yes. And you have to tell one story. I guess you told it every single evening on your book tour. How it happened in the first place that you returned to Osten Ard, because, well, it happened in a way that's quite spectacular, so to say. So you wanted to convince your wife that you would never return, and here we are. So please elaborate.
Yes, my wife, Deborah, who is in the front row and is my business partner and writing partner and everything else partner. Deborah is the sensible member of the partnership in many ways, especially business. I only a few years ago learned what a publishing company is. I always assumed I just, put the manuscript in the mail and little elves came and took it and gave it to people who wanted to read it. No, apparently there is an entire business of selling books. Who knew? Anyway, Deborah used to be part of this business. Ilva, stop. You'll make me laugh. Deborah, my wife, we met because she was my British publisher. She told me she was an elf, so I didn't. But I finally figured it out. No, you were a publisher. Okay. But anyway, because of that, Deborah always has a very sensible kind of a take on what I am doing and helps to make decisions and says things like, don't let the children die, Tad. Don't let the children die. We need to make some money, okay? Very sensible business advice like that. So Deborah has said to me a few times over the years, why do you never go back to Osten Ard? And what I have said to Deborah and others who asked was, I cannot simply go back and write something in a world I've created just to be writing it. The story must come first. I must have a story that I am passionate about telling, in part because the process is very, very long. Years to write a multi-volume story. If you do not love it, you will want to walk away from it. So you have to care. But anyway, Deborah, being the sensible one, kept saying, that doesn't sound like enough of a reason. Why can't you come up with a story idea? So after we had this conversation the last time, I was lying in bed and I was very grumpy, thinking, nobody understands me. It's so sad, and they don't understand what a beautiful, pure artist I am and how I must have my inspiration, And I started thinking of reasons to explain to Deborah why I was not going to be able to just write another Osten Ard story. So one of the first things I thought of is, I am so very different now than when I wrote those books. 30 years. I have ended one marriage and married Deborah. I lived in England for several years. We have had children. We still have children. We will probably always have children because there are laws about that they're not so easy to get rid of. And because of this, I was thinking, I'm so different. I am not the same person who wrote the first books. But as I thought about it, I also began to think, the characters, if that same time had passed for them, half a lifetime, the characters would be so different. When we left Simon and Miriamel, they were teenagers. They had just fallen in love and married. They were going to be the rulers of a whole country. After 30 years of that, that had gone on, many things must have changed. Many experiences must have happened. So I began thinking about that. Oh, yes. And then some of the older characters might be very old or even dead, because I'm told that happens when you're old. I'm not. I told you I was only 35, right? So I'm not worrying about that yet. But You know, some of the old characters will be gone. There will be entire new generations of characters coming along. And I began wondering, who would they be? Did Simon and Miriamel have children? Did Benedict have children? What happened to Count Eolair, etc.? And of course, within a matter of minutes after I got to that point, the ideas are going all over the place. And I got up in the morning and I said to my wife, curse you, curse you. You have ruined me. That is the next 5 years of my life is now just laid out in front of me. I now have an idea for a new Osten Ard book. There's no escape. Now I have to write it. So blame her.
Thanks a lot, Deborah. Now, as you said, we come across some of the characters we already got to know in the first set of books. Are there specific persons, characters you really enjoyed meeting again after so many years? And are there some characters you maybe can't even stand anymore?
Well, if I said I could not stand them anymore, considering that I'm the one who decided what happened to them during those 30 years,
Good point.
it would kind of be my fault, I think. But obviously there are characters that were disturbing or frightening that it was strange to come back to them again. But no, it's odd being a writer because while your characters are very close to you, you can enter into all of them without having to be them, which thank God, because, you know, otherwise all the characters in my books would be me. And, you know, having 250 or 300 characters who are all bald 60-year-old writers, you know, that doesn't make for such a great epic fantasy, I don't think. But all of the characters are also a part of me, and so I feel connected to them. So it's very interesting to go back and find those things in me that I connected with in the first place. And some of them, yes, I am very fond of, the way I would be with anybody who I had lived with for many years and cared about and found out things about and saw them grow and change. So altogether, it's a really interesting experience. It's the first time really that I've done it, and I'm surprised by how much I enjoyed it. So as I said to somebody the other day, perhaps even after I finish these books, if Deborah asks me the wrong question again someday, who knows? Maybe there will be a third journey back to Osten Ard. We don't know.
When you're 42, then.
Yeah, 42. I'll be 42. Yeah, I'll be a little slower, but I'll be okay.
Now, the Ted Williams who wrote the first set of books was, as you said, a different Ted Williams to the one sitting next to me now. But can you perhaps tell me in which way you changed as an author, how you perceive things, how you do things creatively, how you build worlds? So do you see a kind of progression? Well, hopefully you see a kind of progression, but what kind of progression?
Yeah, I wish there was a progression. What happens, and I don't think it's just with writers, I think with all of us, as we become older, we become more ourselves. You know, we begin to realize which things were ways that we were trying to be different than what we were, because we thought that's what was expected, or we wanted to be cool, or, you know, anything popular. But as we age, I think also we begin to see, and I think this is an important lesson, that whatever else you believe happens after you die, the only thing we know for certain is that we have this journey through life. We have these experiences. We cannot go back and do them again. So what you begin to do, I think a little bit, is you throw away the unnecessary things. You realize which things waste your time. You see the traits in yourself that are not so good or unhelpful or cause pain. And you say, I don't know how long I have. I have things I want to do. I have people that I want to love. And you get rid of anything that gets in the way. I think there's something like that going on also for a writer, at least for me, that I am more and more not disinterested in what other writers are doing, but it is not important to me because I am trying so hard to become the writer that I want to be, you know? And the writer that I want to be, yes, I want to be a better writer, obviously, but I also just want to be even more the writer that I am, the more purely Tad-like. Tadlish, yeah. So for me, this is the main thing. And it's funny because somebody wrote me an email about the first book and said, I'm worried you won't have so much description. I like all your description, but I think now you are a writer who is a little more concise, we say in English, a little more concise, a little more brief. And I thought about it and I said, actually, yes, because when I was very first starting, there was still some writers I was imitating, not necessarily on purpose, but just that I wanted to be that way. And so more and more I get my own voice. But when you are writing a sequel to a book that many people know, you also have to say, I am not going to change styles so completely that the readers say, what the hell is this? You know. So I also go back and I think and I make that part of the process of planning the new books. What should an Osten Ard book sound like?
And I guess that's the perfect prelude for a little glimpse into the book.
Well, I hope so. But it was a good job. I mean, you did that very well. Already I'm spelling things. Okay, while I find my place again, I will tell you a little bit about this section. It's a chapter. One of the differences between these books and the first Osten Ard books is that the characters are much the same in many ways, but one thing that is different is that in the first books, I hate to say enemies because it is so simplistic, but the characters that were enemies to the main characters, to the protagonists, Simon, Miriamel, Joshua, Binabik, those characters called the Hikadaya, or the Norns, are the immortals under their queen Utuku, who is at least 9,000 years old. No, really. No, I'm not just saying that to be mean to her. She really, really is. And probably looks it, but we don't know because she always has the mask on. Anyway, so these books I wanted to actually not force the reader, but I wanted the reader to start seeing them from a different perspective. I wanted the reader to say, yes, they are still the enemy, but they are not a faceless enemy. They are not an enemy where everybody is the same. So I have characters in these books who are from the Norns, the sort of what you would call the evil elves, I guess, for lack of a better way of explaining, for those who haven't read the books. And so in this chapter, there is a young Norn soldier who is female, and her name is Nezeru, and she is traveling with what is called a hand, meaning 5 people, a hand of queen's talons. They are specially trained warriors, and one is a magician, and they have their own orders. The order of sacrifice are the warriors. The order of song are the magicians. But they are like almost like a crack commando troop. And they have been sent by the queen herself on a very, very important errand. Nezeru has only found out at the very end of the last chapter that what they are supposed to bring back from an island far out in the ocean are the bones of someone named Hakatri. And Hakatri was the brother of Inaluki, the Storm King, who was the Uber monster, the Uber Teufel figure of the first books. Okay? So they have gotten to this island, and the people who live on the island and the sailors who took them there are mortals. They are not the Norns. Only the Norns are the Norns, those 5 people. The people on the island have been keeping these bones for many years and worshiping them. And so these people have showed up and are coming to the island to get the bones. So they have stopped halfway in their climb up the mountain to where the bones are kept. So this is chapter 12, The Bloody Sand. We don't have a lecture. That's easy. I'll do it sitting down. The morning sky seemed so bright between the branches, and the world so full of new sights and smells and sounds, that Nezeru found it hard to keep her attention on what was before her. Before this, Nezeru has not much ever been out of Nakiga, which is the mountain where the Norns live in the very icy north, surrounded most of the time by freezing ice and snow. Nezeru found it hard to keep her attention on what was before her. The mountainside forest was shrill with birdsong. The colors, more shades of green than she had imagined existed in the world, seemed to crash against her eyes like the sea flinging itself onto the rocks of the shore. She had seen so much in such a short time since leaving Nakiga. First the plains and headlands that had seemed to throb with life, then the ship and the impossibly wide ocean. And now on this island mountainside, the mad cacophony of colors, 1,000 different trees and vines crawling over each other to stretch toward the sun. It was almost hard for her to believe that it was all happening to her, a half-breed, perhaps the youngest Talon ever gifted with the Queen's trust. Yes, one last point, sorry. She is, hey, these are long books. There's a lot to explain. Nezeru, her father, Vieki, is a very important man in the Norn society. Her mother is a mortal. Her mother is a mortal slave. So she is often called a half-blood or a half-breed. It was almost hard for her to believe that it was all happening to her, a half-breed, perhaps the youngest Talon ever gifted with the Queen's trust. Yes, see me now, Father, she exulted to herself. At the order of the Queen, we seek the bones of Hakatri, brother of the Storm King. It was like a story, a new one, a tale whose ending she had not heard time and time again. You make too much noise, Mako, the chieftain growled. I hear your every footfall. The Queen's Talons, their mortal guides from the village, and their translator, the ship's captain, had begun climbing again by dawn's first light when the mortals could see. Mako was clearly disgusted at being delayed by mortal frailties, but the islanders had warned that the shrine, as the ship's captain called it, was guarded against strangers, and there was no way to tell them of the Hikadaya's arrival beforehand. As the sun rose higher and higher, and Nezeru grew more used to the rioting greenery, the slopes on either side of the mountain trail continued to produce more astonishing colors. Crimson, cup-shaped flowers like falling blood drops, great swaying banks of yellow mountain olive, and lavender-blooming heather that clung to the slopes like a fur mantle, delighting Nezeru's eye. The singer, Saumeji, insisted on naming them all, breaking in on her pleasure to identify marsh marigold in wet ditches, moss campion, and saxifrage, as if naming something added to its pleasure, or knowing was somehow better than simply seeing. The sun was still well short of noon when they reached the summit and what the mortal captain called the place of the bones, a large, low, circular stone house with a sod roof. Many more of the small, brown mortals came out of the building to greet them, all of them male, with shaved heads and wearing similar clothing, yellow and blue robes belted at the waist by colorful scarves. To Nazeru, some of them seemed no more than children, and it was these who watched the approach of the Hikadaya and their escort with the greatest curiosity. Then, as Mako and the rest approached the low front door of the building, a final small group came out, 2 shaven-headed men helping a third, who was the strangest, oldest mortal she had ever seen, his skin so full of wrinkles that he might have been made of jerked meat. The Rimmersman captain stepped forward and made a long speech in the villagers' tongue that had the old man nodding and smiling. When the captain finished, the wrinkled old man replied at length. "The head priest welcomes you," the captain explained. "He says he is very pleased that the people of the bones have come to this place to pay their respects. And he wishes to let you know that he and his priestly ancestors have honored and cared for the bones for more years than the meadow has grass blades, and will do so until the sun falls from the sky." Nazeru understood now that this place was some kind of religious shrine, and that all these men and boys were either priests or in training to become priests, like order acolytes back home. But how had mere mortals become the stewards of Hakatri's remains? Mako was not one for decorated speech. "Tell him we will see the bones now." His abruptness caused more than a little consternation among the priests, but at last they led their Hikadaya visitors inside the building. A few hides covered with swirls of paint hung on the walls, but otherwise the large main room with pounded dirt floors was dark, but for the fire pit in the center and the smoke hole. But Nazeru, the smoke hole in the roof. The place smelled of many things, mortal human bodies not least, but Nazeru could also detect sweet oils and the charred dust of flowers and plants, small offerings burned over many years whose cloying scents had infused everything. The old chief priest said something, gesturing with his hand. "The fire always burns," the captain translated. "That way the sacred bones are always in the light." The collection of brown bones was piled in a shallow pit just beyond the fire. A skeleton, neatly stacked, with the skull placed on top. The bones were oddly pitted, filled with holes, as though someone had attempted to make them into musical instruments, then put them aside again unfinished. The old priest spoke. "He says, 'Behold,'" the captain translated, "'these are the bones of the burning man.'" His fellow priests made a kind of moaning sound, but precise and measured, as though part of a long-practiced ritual. "See the scars made by the dragon's blood," said Saumeji. He spoke quietly, but there was exultation in his voice. Nazeru, too, was awed to see the actual remains of Hakatri, the Storm King's brother. Hakatri, the dragon burned, revered by both Scythi and Norns. Together, Hakatri and his younger brother, who would one day be known the world over as Inaluki, the Storm King, had slain the black dragon Hidohebi. But the curse of Hakatri's unhealing wounds had driven him out of the lands of his people, and neither Zidaya nor Hikadaya had ever seen him alive again. Could these bones truly be his? Nazeru looked to Mako, but saw no doubts in the chieftain's expression. "These are what we came for," was all he said. "Mortal, tell the priest that our great queen needs them, so we will take them now." The captain stared at him, his bearded face so pale he almost looked like one of Nazeru's band. "But I cannot say that," he stammered. "They will kill us." Mako looked at him with contempt. It is possible they will try. No matter, tell them. Please do not make me say these words, immortal ones, the captain begged. Tell them. The priests had been watching in apprehension, understanding something was wrong, but when the captain translated Mako's words, they cried out in agony. The old priest pulled free from his two helpers and climbed to his feet, limping forward until he stood between Mako and the bones. He raised trembling arms. His high-pitched voice was full of agitation and anger. But when the captain started to translate, Mako waved his hand for silence. I do not need to know his objections. They are unimportant. The queen of all has sent us for the bones of her kinsmen. Tell the old man that his people have cared for them well, and they have the queen's gratitude. That should be enough for them. Sorry, lost it there for a moment. That should be enough for them. But the captain had barely begun speaking when the old priest let out a shriek of anguish, then turned and threw himself across the bones where they lay on their bed of sand, shielding them with his scrawny body. Mako stared at him, then looked at the other priests and acolytes, now shoving in through the door, their faces dark with anger. Mako had his sword in his hand so quickly that Nezeru did not see him draw it. A moment later, it swept out, and the ancient priest's head rolled to one side. Before the severed neck had pumped twice, Mako used his foot to shove the body away from the bones, so that the blood only seeped onto the stones and into the crevices between them. The old priest's comrades cried out in horror. Singer, gather noble Hakatri's remains, Mako ordered. We return to the ship. Even as Saomeji hurried to comply, the nearest of the dead priest's helpers leaped at Mako with a shout of fury, only to be sliced through to the backbone by an offhand flick of cold root, the chief's witchwood blade. More priests began streaming into the temple house, screaming as if they had lost their minds, grabbing at the Norns with the clear purpose of tearing them to pieces. Keme immediately killed two with one thrust of his spear, spitting them like meat on a skewer. Some of those outside are running for help, Ibikai called from the doorway. Nezeru felt something tighten around her neck and yank her head backward. One of the shaven-headed priests, small but wiry and strong, had pulled Nezeru's own bow across her shoulder and over her head, and was now trying to strangle her with her own string. She got one hand between the bowstring and her neck at the last moment, but the mortal had his knee in her back and was pulling as hard as he could. She was separated from the rest of her comrades by the swirl of attackers and could not get leverage on the string to loosen it. So she groped for her knife with her free hand and cut the string. As the bow fell uselessly to the floor, Nezeru spun and slashed through the priest's sack-like garment, opening his belly. He sagged, a look of surprise and disappointment in his suddenly mild eyes. 3 more dead priests now lay by Mako's feet, but he seemed almost oblivious to the grief-maddened mob. Nezeru, Keme, go after those who fled, he directed them. Do not let them reach the village, or they will raise the alarm, and the rest will swarm us like ants. Saomeji, you must keep the bones safe as we go. We may have to fight our way down to the water. Rayu atanana, Nezeru replied, the ancient phrase that signified, I hear the queen in your voice. She had to leap over one of Keme's victims, who writhed in the doorway, trying to lift himself up with both of his arms gone, and the severed ends gushing blood like a mountain cataract. Outside, Keme had drawn his bow. As Nezeru emerged from the building, she saw him and let the first arrow fly. She saw him let the first arrow fly. One of the fleeing mortal priests stumbled, fell, and did not get up. A scant moment later, Keme loosed a second shaft, and another escaping priest tumbled, then dropped. Only a few of the fleeting priests were still visible on the side of the hilltop Keme had already chosen as his field of fire. So she left them to him and headed after the others. She no longer had a bow of her own, just her sword and knife, but that only meant she would have to outrun them, something that should not be difficult for one of the queen's death-sung sacrifice warriors. Following them would be even easier. The scent of the escaping mortals hung in the air, animal clouds of terror and exertion. She sprinted swiftly down the slope, her feet barely touching earth, and ran down the first fleeing priest within 100 paces. He was mature and larger than Nazeru, but nowhere near as fit as a queen's talon. When he stopped to gasp for breath, he saw her coming, grimaced in resignation, and snatched up a large branch. From the way he held it, he was no stranger to a fight, and the last thing Nazeru wanted was to waste time trading blows with him, because she could smell another mortal farther down the hill. A long struggle with this one might allow time for the other to reach the village and tell his people what had happened. "Blood of the garden, guide my arm," she prayed quietly, balancing her dagger. Then, before she was close enough for the big priest to swing his club, she let it fly. The priest dropped the branch and sank to his knees, clawing at the knife that now stood in his throat. By the time she had taken 3 more steps, he was on his face, barely squirming, his blood matting the grassy earth. Nazeru put her foot on his head and shoved it to one side, freeing a last rattling gasp from his throat. Then she retrieved her knife and hurried down the mountainside after her other quarry. The scent of the next mortal's terror was strong, but his sweat smelled curiously sweet. It also took a longer time than she had expected before she could finally hear him crashing through the undergrowth a few dozen yards below her. The fugitive was moving with surprising speed, which gave her a moment of worry. No mortal priest could have been trained and strengthened in all the ways Nazeru had been during her years in the order of sacrifice. How could this one pass through the tangled brush and close-standing trees so easily? Then, as she emerged into the open and could look out over the expanse of mountainside below her, she finally saw her quarry's shaved head glinting in the sunshine like a raindrop on a leaf. It was a child, one of the young acolytes. Nazeru knew little of mortal children, but thought this one could not have been much past the age when boys first left their mothers to follow their fathers into the field or forest. A moment later, the boy vanished behind trees once more as he ran down the sloping hillside. Nazeru sped her pace, but could see that he was far enough ahead that if she did not reach a clear spot quickly where she could take him down, he would be in shouting distance of the village before she could stop him. She hurried toward the next open view, risking several falls that would have ended the pursuit. But at last she reached a place that overlooked a large part of the slope beneath her. She held a knife behind her ear, waiting for the boy to appear, watching a gap as wide as a door frame between 2 trees. Nazeru had been one of the best in her entire rank with a throwing knife, and these blades had been a gift from her father. A beautifully balanced pair of antique daggers forged by Tenukadaya craftsmen. Now all she had to do was wait. It did not take long. The child made enough noise as he hurried downward that she could almost have hit him with her eyes closed. When he appeared in the opening between the 2 trees, Nazeru let out a loud cry of triumph. "Ha!" calculated to freeze him for a sufficient instant. It did. At her shout, the boy stumbled and almost fell, turning a look of blind terror toward the hillside above him as he fought to regain his balance. He was indeed small, his legs still too short for adulthood, his shaved head too large. In the fractional instant he swayed there between the framing trunks, she could even see the curve of his childish belly and his eyes full of tears. Perfect. All she had to do was let her blade fly. But she did not throw it. A moment later, the little acolyte regained his footing and was gone again, racing down the path. She heard his footsteps grow fainter, even as his scent began to fade on the breeze. Nazeru was astonished at herself. She had failed. She had not even tried. Why had she let down her comrades and betrayed her queen? She didn't know, but something about the child, his small size, his realness, had shocked her in a way she had not foreseen. I've betrayed my people. That was all she could think. She could have killed the boy easily, ended the threat of his escape, but she had not done it. It was as though her own body had turned traitor without explanation. Nazeru could not understand what had happened. All she could do was climb back up the hill to join Mako and the others. She was a traitor and deserved death. That was the simple truth. But Nazeru did not want to die. But if you saw his eyes, how could you fail your shot? Mako was furious, as well he should have been. The 5 Talons were hurrying down the mountainside now, the mortal captain following them as best he could. I told you, Mako, my knife struck a vine and went astray. Nazeru had never lied to her fellow sacrifices before. It was a bizarre sensation, like discovering that despite what everyone said, she could actually walk upon thin air. But as with walking on air, she could not believe it would last, and the knowledge of what would happen when the truth of things reasserted itself terrified her. It is bad enough that I failed, she thought, but to evade punishment like a coward by lying to my hand chieftain. She felt as though she, not the wrinkled mortal priest, had been the one whose head had been cut off. Everything she had thought, everything she had believed had been dashed to pieces in an instant. Let us not waste time talking, pleaded Sao Meiji. He was carrying the bundle that contained the bones as he ran, cradling them as a mother would cradle an infant. The singer is right, said Mako. We will speak of your failure later, Talon Nazeru. Now we must be silent. The mortals may not wait until we reach the village to attack us. He was right. The mortals did not wait. Before the afternoon sun had fallen all the way behind the mountain, the Talons were attacked by a group of men from the village. Unlike the priests, these had armed themselves with bows and arrows, with knives of bone and clubs. Sadly for them, they were not fighting other mortals, but the trained soldiers of the Queen of the North. Ibikai took an arrow wound in his arm, and Nazeru herself only avoided having her skull smashed by throwing herself between an attacker's legs and hamstringing him from behind. But in the end, the armed islanders fared no better against the Queen's talons than had the unarmed priests. Nearly 24 bodies lay on the ground when the village men finally retreated, and none of those corpses belonged to the Hikedaya. The day was all but over by the time they reached the base of the mountain, the sky purple as a bruise, but the village was bright with fires as Nazeru and the rest of the Hikedaya came down out of the heights. A mass of villagers waited on the beach of the bay, where the Black Rimmersman's ship lay out at anchor. The sailors had seen what was happening and had rowed their shore boat beyond the range of the villagers' arrows and stones, to wait. Nazeru wondered how long it would take to swim out that far. Then she had no time to think. No time to think of anything, because the villagers fell upon them in a great crowd, most of them screaming with rage. It was nothing like the armed attack on the mountainside. There were women and even children among these desperate attackers, some barehanded, but others swinging heavy stones or digging tools. In the dim light, Nazeru even saw some of the women stabbing at her companions with bone sewing needles, the only weapons they had been able to find. In the chaos of fighting her way down to the beach, Nazeru had to take what came, but she did her best not to kill children or women unnecessarily. Instead, she pushed them away or knocked them witless with the pommels of her sword and dagger. Saumeji, the magician, beside her, clutching the sacred bones against his chest, seemed to have no such compunctions. Each time an islander approached him, his bare hand darted out like a striking snake. Everywhere it touched, there was a flash and a thump of air, then the smell of burning flesh as another assailant collapsed to the ground. And veteran sacrifices, Mako and Keme, were like deadly whirlwinds, destroying everything that drew near them, turning living flesh into lifeless lumps so swiftly Nazeru could not always make out what they had done. At last, Mako fought his way down to the edge of the beach, his face covered with bloody scratches, his long white hair pulled free of its elaborate hair coiffure and whipping in the breeze like a ragged banner. The longboat began to row toward them. Mako turned and grabbed Saumeji, then shoved him out into the deeper water. The singer lifted the bones high above his head as he waded out, paying little attention to the villagers' crude arrows splashing around him. Mako followed, backing into the bay until the water reached his waist. Nazeru had fallen behind the others, and now had to fight her way clear of a group of older men and women to get down to the beach. She batted their withered arms aside as if they were tree branches swiping at her face. Keme was in the shallows ahead of her, still dropping bodies in a wide semicircle described by the length of his blade. The beach was strewn with corpses, many with black arrows jutting from throat or belly or back. The whisperer Ibikai stumbled along just behind Keme, holding his wounded arm close to his side. For a moment, Nazeru thought they had escaped, but then she saw the ship's mortal captain stumble out of the forest and collapse, clearly all but exhausted. The villagers saw him, and several of them moved to surround him. Can the ship even sail without its captain? Nazeru wondered. She hastened back through the shallows and leaped into the midst of the villagers, sword slashing and biting. As the islanders fell away from their victim, several holding bloody wounds, she dragged the captain back onto his feet and pushed him ahead of her into the surf. She waited until he was up and had almost reached the longboat, with Saumeji and his precious burden in the lead. My fellow Talons will leave me here, she suddenly realized. As they should. The queen would want it so. If I cannot get to the boat, they will leave me here. She knew what being captured by the furious villagers would mean. However these people might have come to have Hakatri's relics, it was clear they worshipped them. We have stolen their god. Something struck her, full in the back, an impact so sudden that for a moment she thought she had been arrow shot. Then she felt hands pulling at her hair, nails scraping her face, and heard wordless howls. Her sword had tumbled to the sand just beyond her reach, but she managed to curl her fingers around one of her throwing knives and pull it from her harness. She stabbed backward, catching something with meat on it. Somebody screeched just behind her, and the grappling arms loosened for a moment. Nazeru smashed backwards again, this time with the pommel of her knife, guessing where her enemy's head must be, and felt the satisfaction of impact. The burden fell away from her. Nazeru crawled forward until she could reach her sword. But even as her fingers closed on the hilt, she was attacked again and had to turn and try to push her assailant away. The figure was small, but fat around the middle, something she had only an instant to notice before she managed to roll out from under the grasping, mad thing. She could hear Mako, the chieftain, out across the water, calling to the sailors to hurry. But she could hear other, angrier cries from much nearer, and knew that whoever had attacked her would soon have help. Finally free, she staggered upright and saw that her attacker was a young woman with dark hair in a wild tangle and eyes red with tears. The woman's hand curved into claws as she caught up to Nazeru again, trying to swipe at her face. Nazeru thrust her sword blade through her attacker's robe and her rounded body, then pushed the blade deeper. The woman's eyes bulged, and she opened her mouth as if to speak. Blood was on her tongue and her teeth. Then she fell heavily onto the red sand, and a blood-spotted bundle rolled out of her robe. A baby had been strapped to her chest. Nazeru's sword had pierced them both. "My father, Lord Vieki, I am so sorry," was her first thought. "How shamed you will be to have such a daughter." A bone-tipped arrow snapped into the sand near her foot, scarcely a hand's breadth from the dead woman's slack face. Nazeru turned and ran out into the water. I thought something a little cheerful and lighthearted might be in order for tonight. So, a little party piece, we would call it in English. So.
It's very optimistic. Thanks for that. Before we hear another passage, this time in German, maybe we can just talk a little more about, you mentioned world building, that you like it a lot. And when we met in Munich last week, you told me that once you're in your office working, nobody is allowed to disturb you. And if someone disturbs you, you smack them with a stick.
Well, that's if I have a good stick somewhere close by. But I can use anything, really. You know, a shoe, a chair, one of the dogs.
Well, the question is not focusing on smacking people, but on how do you usually surface when you spend a whole day in Osten Ard? So is it sometimes difficult for you to come back to what we call reality?
I'm not sure. Is this reality? So,
I'm not sure either.
Okay. See, as far as I know, yes, it's okay, and I can do it. No, I don't. For one thing, I do the thinking first. I do the thinking first before I do the writing. I lie there for an hour or two, and I plan how I will weave things together and what will happen in that day's section and what else I might add that will mean something later on. And I do all this lying down with earbuds in my ears to keep away the sound of my children playing Mario Kart at extremely high concert volume, you know, all day long. So I put in the earbuds and I listen to calm music and I think, but then I go and I actually do the writing. So the writing is almost like a transition back to the real world again. So I have that. So no, I am not one of those writers who disappears and has trouble coming back to the world. I sometimes have problems understanding things people say to me, but that's not because of writing. That's just this, you know.
Right. As we will be hearing a passage that is focusing on a very intense conversation, and we've been now hearing a very fast-paced action piece. So, do you prefer the one to the other? So, do you have a certain preference?
Well, I can only speak for myself. What I like as a writer is what I like as a reader, which is that I like a mixture of many things. I like some humor, you know, some funny things. I like horrifying things that are upsetting and that you think about at night with your eyes closed. I like characters having conversations where we learn about the characters. I like mythology. I like folk tales. I like singing. I like action. And I like more quiet, thoughtful pieces also. So I think especially a big book, a very big book, I think really has to be a mixture of many, many, many kinds of things, because in a sense, it's another kind of world building. You are inviting people to come live with what you've made. And if it is always the same all through, that is not a very interesting place to visit. So if there are moments that are funny and moments that are sad and moments that are frightening, it's like life, you know, and it feels more real, and I think it is more entertaining and interesting to spend time there.
Absolutely true. Now that we've been hearing a funny piece.
Me and my wacky sense of humor.
So let's invite Barbara again to read another passage, this time in German.
Der Mond war schon fast voll, lag aber wie auch die Sterne hinter einem Wolkenvorhang verborgen. Janulf konnte sich leicht vorstellen, in jenem hohen Dunkel zu schweben, wo nur Gott lebte, wie ein Beichtpriester, der sich in seinem dunklen Kasten den ganzen Tag die Sünden der Menschen anhörte. Aber Gott, dachte er, hat nicht diesen Leichengeruch in der Nase. Janulf blickte auf den Leichnam, der nahe dem Baumstamm am Rande der Bestattungsplattform lag. Es war eine alte Frau. Die Hände von vielen Jahren harter Arbeit so knorrig wie Baumwurzeln, der Körper nur mit einer dünnen Decke zugedeckt, wie für eine Sommernacht, statt für die Ewigkeit. Ihr Kinn war hochgebunden und in den Augenhöhlen hatte sich Schnee gesammelt, sodass sie wie blind und der Welt entrückt wirkte. Hier im äußersten Norden von Rimmersgard mochten sie zwar am Altar des neuen Gottes und seines Sohnes Osiris Ädon beten, aber sie ehrten auch noch die alten Götter und die alten Gebräuche. Die Tote hatte dicke Birkenrindenschuhe an, was hieß, dass sie nicht für ein triumphales Erscheinen am himmlischen Hof des Erlösers Osiris gekleidet war, sondern für den langen Marsch durch die kalte, stillen Lande des Todes. Es schien barbarisch, Tote einfach den Aasfressern und Elementen zu überlassen. Aber die Rimmersleute, die bei diesem uralten Wald lebten, fanden es so natürlich, wie es die Südländer fanden, ihre Toten in kleine Steinhäuser zu legen oder in Löchern zu vergraben. Doch was Janulf interessierte, waren nicht die lokalen Sitten und Gebräuche und nicht einmal die Meinungen, was die Seele der toten Frau im Jenseits erwartete, sondern die Aasfresser, die der Leichnam anlocken würde, insbesondere eine Sorte. Der Wind frischte auf, trieb Wolken über den schwarzen Himmel und fuhr in die Baumkronen. Die Plattform, auf der Janulf 30 Ellen über dem eisigen Boden saß, schaukelte wie ein kleines Boot auf rauer See. Er zog den Mantel enger um sich und wartete. Er hörte es, bevor er irgendetwas sah. Ein Rascheln im Geäst, das aus dem Rhythmus der Windgeräusche herausfiel. Seine Nase nahm es wenige Augenblicke später wahr, und obwohl der Leichnam am anderen Ende der Plattform seinen eigenen Geruch verströmte, erschien Janulf dieser verglichen mit dem neuen Gestank schon fast angenehm. Er war dankbar, als der Wind drehte, obwohl es ihm einen Moment lang unmöglich machte, das Nahen jenes Wesens zu verfolgen, auf das er seit dem Ende des dunklen nördlichen Nachmittags wartete. Jetzt sah er es, oder jedenfalls einen Teil davon, ein Aufschimmern langer, bleicher Gliedmaßen in einem nahen Baum. Wie er gehofft hatte, war es ein Leichenriese, ein Hune, der zu klein oder zu alt war, um erfolgreich zu jagen, und deshalb auf tote Tiere oder Menschen angewiesen war. Der sinkende Mond gab immer noch genügend Licht, dass Janulf die langen Beine arbeiten sah, als die Kreatur durch die Baumkronen auf ihn zukam wie eine riesige weiße Spinne. Janulf atmete tief durch und fragte sich wieder, ob es bereuen würde, Bogen und Köcher am Boden gelassen zu haben. Doch damit wäre das Klettern schwierig gewesen, und selbst mehrere Pfeile würden einen Riesen nicht schnell genug töten, sodass sie ihm auf einem so engen Kampfplatz nichts genützt hätten. Zumal sein Vorhaben nicht war, die Kreatur zu töten, sondern Antworten aus ihr herauszubekommen. Natürlich hatte er Angst. Nur ein Verrückter hätte keine gehabt. Dann verschwand die bleiche Kreatur, die eben noch im Nachbarbaum gewesen war, unter dem Rand der Plattform, und gleich darauf fühlte er, wie diese sich unter ihm neigte, als sich der Hune hinaufzog. Zuerst erschienen die Hände mit knotigen Knöcheln und schwarzen Krallen und jede so groß wie eine Speisenplatte. Dann kam der Kopf, ein weißer Klumpen, der sich emporschob, bis die glitzernden Zwillingsmonde der Augen sichtbar wurden. Trotz seiner Furcht dachte Janulf, dass das Monster hastig zusammengeschustert wirkte. Besonders die langen, behaarten Gliedmaßen seltsame Winkel bildeten. Es zog sich so vorsichtig auf die Plattform hinauf, dass das Holz unter dem enormen Gewicht kaum knarrte. Die glitzernden Augen wandten sich keinen Moment von der toten Frau am anderen Ende. Janulf hatte schon viele Riesen gesehen, sogar gegen einige gekämpft und es überlebt. Aber die abergläubische Furcht verschwand nie ganz. Die zotteligen, kräftigen Gliedmaßen waren wesentlich länger als seine. Doch dieses Exemplar war älter und kleiner als die meisten seiner Artgenossen. Ja, nur die Arme und Beine waren von voller Größe. Der geschrumpfte Körper und der kleine Kopf schienen irgendwie dazwischen zu hängen, sodass es aussah wie ein behaarter Krebs oder ein langbeiniges Rieseninsekt. Das Fell des Njahunen war stellenweise schütter. Und selbst im Mondlicht konnte Janulf erkennen, dass das einstige Schneeweiß jetzt mit Altersgrau durchsetzt war. Doch auch wenn das Monster alt war, vergegenwärtigte sich Janulf, mochte es selbst einen kräftigen Mann mühelos zu töten. Wenn ihn diese grotesken Krallenhände zu fassen bekämen, würden sie ihn im Nu zerreißen. Der Riese bewegte sich über die Plattform auf die Leiche zu, als Janulf plötzlich laut sagte: »Was machst du da, Nachtdieb? Mit welchem Recht störst du die Totenruhe?« Das Ungeheuer fuhr erschrocken zusammen, und Janulf sah, wie die Beinmuskeln sich anspannten, sei es zum Angriff oder zur Flucht. »Rühr dich nicht, Leichenfresser«, sagte er in der Sprache der Hekedaier, nicht sicher, ob es ihn überhaupt verstand, geschweige denn antworten konnte. »Ich bin genau hinter dir. Eine Bewegung, die mir nicht passt, und mein Speer durchbohrt dein Herz. Aber du sollst wissen, wenn ich dich töten wollte, gottlose Kreatur, wärst du schon tot. Ich will nur reden.« »Du willst reden?« Die alten Geschichten waren wohl wahr. Manche der älteren Hunen konnten tatsächlich Wörter verstehen und gebrauchen, was hieß, dass es nicht umsonst gewesen war, dieses schreckliche Risiko einzugehen. »Ja, dreh dich um, Monster, zu mir.« Janulf steckte das Ende seines Speers zwischen zwei der zusammengebundenen Äste, die die Plattform bildeten, und richtete ihn so aus, dass die Spitze auf das Herz des Riesen zeigte, wie auf einen Magneteisenstein. »Ich weiß, du denkst, du könntest dich jetzt hinunterschwingen und entkommen, bevor ich dich ernstlich verletzen kann. Aber wenn du das tust, wirst du nie hören, welchen Handel ich dir anbiete, und du wirst sehr wahrscheinlich heute Nacht nichts fressen. Hast du zufällig Hunger?« Das Monster hockte in einem Gewirr seiner eigenen Arme und Beine wie ein grässlich missgestalteter Bettler und starrte Janulf mit boshaft glimmenden Augen an. Sein Gesicht war rissig und zerfurcht wie altes Leder, die Haut viel dunkler als das Fell. Der Riese war tatsächlich alt, das bewiesen seine steifen Bewegungen und sein pendelnder Hängebauch. Aber die verengten Augen und die überwiegend heilen Zähne verkündeten, dass er trotzdem noch gefährlich war. Janulf zeigte auf den Leichnam. »Beantworte meine Fragen, dann kannst du dein Mahl haben.« Die Kreatur musterte ihn misstrauisch. »Nicht dein...« Nein, diese alte Frau ist nicht meine Großmutter oder Urgroßmutter, ich kenne nicht mal ihren Namen. Aber ich habe gesehen, wie ihre Angehörigen sie hier heraufgebracht haben, und ich habe sie miteinander reden hören. Ich weiß, dass du und deinesgleichen überall in diesem Teil Rimmersgards Baumbeisetzungsstätten plündert obwohl euer Revier viele Meilen weiter nördlich liegt. Die Frage ist, warum? Der Riese starrte unverwandt auf die Speerspitze nur wenige Ellen vor seiner haarigen Brust. Ich sage, was du willst wissen, dann du trotzdem töten. Nicht reden so, nicht Speer. Januf senkte den Speer langsam auf das Holz, legte ihn so hin, dass selbst die langen Arme des Riesen ihn nicht erreichen konnten, ließ jedoch die Hand darüber schweben. Also, sprich jetzt, du Ausgeburt des Teufels. Ich warte, dass du mir sagst, warum. Warum was? Knurrte die Kreatur. Warum ihr plötzlich wieder in Rimmersgard umherstreunt und noch dazu so weit südlich, in Landen, aus denen ihr vor Generationen vertrieben wurdet? Welcher Notstand hat euch Teufelsbrut aus den Nornfjällen hierher getrieben? Der Leichenriese starrte Janulf so wachsam an, wie vorher die Speerspitze, und sein Atem ging rau. Was ist Notstand? Fragte er schließlich. Ja, schlechte Zeiten. Los, sag, warum seid ihr hier? Warum habt ihr wieder begonnen, in den Menschenlanden zu jagen? Und warum stehlen die Ältesten und Schwächsten von euch, wie du, die Toten der Menschen, um sich zu ernähren? Ich will es wissen. Hast du mich verstanden? Verstanden, ja. Der Riese nickte. Eine groteske Geste bei einer solchen Bestie, und verzog sein Gesicht zu einem Gewirr von Falten. Sprech deine Wörter nicht, ja. Warum? Hier, ihr Hunger! Das Monster streckte seine graue Zunge hervor und fuhr sich damit über die rissigen Lippen, was Janulf wieder bewusst machte, dass es genauso gern ihn fressen würde, wie die namenlose Alte, deren Freiluftgrab das hier war. Ja, mein Gott, betete er, gib mir Weisheit, wenn es soweit ist. Hunger reicht nicht als Antwort. Riese, warum kommt ihr bis nach Rimmersgard? Was ist dort oben im Norden los? Endlich, als wäre er zu einem Entschluss gekommen, verzog der Riese das Maul zu einer Art Grinsen, einem Zähneblecken, das eher warnend als freundlich wirkte. Ja, wir reden, ich rede, aber erst sagen Namen, ich. Er schlug sich mit einer mächtigen Hand auf seine Brust. Burjokar, jetzt du, sag. Ich sag dir meinen Namen nicht, Kreatur. Wenn du dich auf mein Angebot einlassen willst, dann gib mir, was ich verlange. Wenn nicht, nun gut, dann endet unser Handel eben anders. Er legte die Hand auf dem Speerschaft neben sich. Die glimmenden Augen des Riesen huschten zu der Waffe, dann wieder zu Janulfs Gesicht. Du fragst, warum Riesen kommen hier? Verfressen? Im Norden viele Mäuler hungrig, zu viele Mäuler. Was meinst du mit zu viele Mäuler? Hegedaya, du sagst Nornen. Zu viele. Norden ist aufgewacht. Jäger sind überall. Die Nornen jagen euch? Warum? Für Kämpfen. Janulf setzte sich auf seine Fersen und versuchte, sich einen Reim darauf zu machen. Das ist doch unsinnig. Warum sollten die Hegedaya gegen euch kämpfen wollen? Ihr Riesen wart ihnen doch immer zu Willen. Das Ungetüm drehte den Kopf hin und her. Das Gesicht war nicht menschlich, aber in den Augen glomm etwas, ein größeres Maß an Intelligenz, das er zunächst gedacht hatte. Es erinnerte Janulf an einen großen Affen, den er einmal gesehen hatte. Die Trophäe eines Händlers in Navid, der das Tier in einem Käfig im Hof seines Hauses hielt. Die Augen des Affen waren so menschlich gewesen wie die eines Mannes, und wie er so zusammengesunken in der Ecke seines viel zu kleinen Gefängnisses gesessen hatte, war Verzweiflung von ihm ausgegangen. Nicht alles, was denkt, ist ein Mensch, hatte Janulf damals gedacht, und jetzt dachte er es wieder. Nicht kämpfen gegen. Sie wollen, wir kämpfen für sie. Wieder. Er brauchte einen Moment, um es zu verstehen. Für die Nornen kämpfen? Gegen wen? Menschen. Wir sollen kämpfen gegen Menschen. Der Riese entblößte die Zähne. Wie dich? Das war unmöglich. Es konnte nicht stimmen. Wovon redest du? Die Hegedaya sind nicht stark genug, um wieder gegen die Menschen zu kämpfen. Sie haben im Sturmkönigskrieg fast alles verloren, und es sind kaum noch welche übrig. Das ist doch alles vorbei. Nichts vorbei. Nie vorbei. Aber der Riese sah ihn nicht an, sondern starrte gebannt auf den Leichnam der alten Frau, dachte wieder an sein Nachtmahl. Ich glaub dir nicht, sagte Janulf. Burjokar wandte sich ihm zu, und er glaubte fast schon so etwas wie Belustigung in dem hässlichen, ledrigen Gesicht zu sehen. Jäh ging Janulf auf, wo er war und was er hier machte und wie verrückt das war, und sein Herz begann zu rasen. Glauben, nicht glauben, eilerlei, erklärte der Riese. Ganze Norden wacht auf, sind überall. Die Weißen sind alle wieder wach, hungrig, nach Krieg, weil sie ist wieder wach. Sie, Königin mit Silbergesicht, wieder wach. Nein, die Königin der Norden, nein, das kann nicht sein. Janulf war, als ob sich Gott selbst aus dem Himmel herabgebeugt und ihn ins Gesicht geschlagen hätte. Von einem Moment auf den anderen war alles, was ihn Vater gelehrt hatte, all seine Gewissheit über den Haufen geworfen worden. Du lügst mich an, du Tier. Er wollte unbedingt glauben, dass es so war. Jeder weiß, dass die Nornenkönigin seit der Niederlage des Sturmkönigs im Todesschlaf liegt. Schon über 30 Jahre, sie wird nie wieder erwachen. Der Riese richtete sich langsam auf, um ein neues Lodern in den Augen zu. Burjokar lügt nicht. Die Bestie hatte Janus kurze Unaufmerksamkeit bemerkt und noch während ihm das klar wurde, trat sie schon einen Schritt auf ihn zu. Obwohl noch immer die halbe Länge der Plattform zwischen ihnen lag, setzte die Kreatur einen riesigen, knorrigen Fuß auf die Speerspitze und klemmte sie so auf dem zusammengebundenen Ästen fest. Nochmal Frage. Was ist dein Name, kleiner Mann? Wütend und erschrocken über seinen Fehler stand Janulf auf und machte einen langsamen Schritt rückwärts zum Rand der Plattform. Er verlagerte sein Gewicht auf den hinteren Fuß. Name? Ich habe viele Namen. Manche nennen mich die Weiße Hand. Weiße Hand. Der Riese machte noch einen schlurfenden Schritt auf ihn zu, ohne den Speer freizugeben. Nein, im Norden mir gehört von Weiße Hand. Großer Krieger, stark, nicht dünn wie du. Die Kreatur gab ein Geräusch von sich, halb Schnauben, halb Grunzen, ein Lachen vielleicht, dachte Janulf. Schau, du legst Speer weg. Jäger, Krieger, niemals legt Speer weg. Janulf roch jetzt verwestes Menschenfleisch unter den Krallen und zwischen den Zähnen des Riesen und zugleich den Gestank der Bestie selbst, sauer stechend und so stark, dass er selbst durch den steifen, kalten Wind drang. Ich hab schon gegessen, junge Menschen wie dich. Der Leichenriese grinste jetzt, die Augen beim Gedanken an ein lebendes Mahl zu glitzernden Schlitzen verengt. Zart, Fleisch geht leicht von Knochen. Ich bin fertig mit dir, du gottlose Kreatur. Ich habe erfahren, was ich wissen wollte. Doch in Wahrheit wollte Janulf nur fliehen, irgendwohin rennen und über das nachdenken, was die Kreatur gesagt hatte. Die Nornenkönigin, wach, die Nornen vor einem neuen Krieg, das konnte doch alles gar nicht sein. Du fertig mit mir. Wieder das belustigste Schnauben, gefolgt von dem Aasgeruch. Obwohl der Riese sich zu ihm herabbeugte, sah Janulf den hässlichen Kopf immer noch hoch über sich, und er war auch jetzt in Reichweite der schrecklich langen Arme. Dieses Monster mochte ja alt sein und sich seine Nahrung von Bestattungsplattformen stehlen müssen, aber es wog immer noch etwa 3-mal so viel wie er, und er saß hier auf dieser hohen, kleinen Plattform in der Falle. Janulf machte noch einen letzten Schritt rückwärts, tastete mit dem Fuß nach dem Rand der Plattform. Dahinter wartete nur noch ein tiefer Fall durch spitze Äste auf steinigen Boden. Nicht mal genug Schnee, um meinen Aufprall zu dämpfen, dachte er. O Herr, mach meinen Arm stark und mein Herz standhaft, in deinem Namen und im Namen deines Sohnes, Osiris Edon. Und als er plötzlich die Kälte bemerkte, zog er seinen Mantel fester zusammen. Der Riese beachtete die kleine, unwichtige Bewegung gar nicht. Vielmehr beugte sich der mächtige, hämisch grinsende Kopf noch weiter herab, bis er auf gleicher Höhe mit dem seinen war. Janulf konnte nirgendwo hin, und das wusste der Riese. Er streckte eine mächtige Hand aus und legte sie in einer grotesken Nachahmung von Zärtlichkeit an Janulfs Wange. Die Finger, jede so dick wie der Schaft des jetzt unerreichbaren Speers, krümmten sich, aber Janulf duckte sich vor ihnen weg, ehe sie in sein Haar greifen und ihm den Kopf umdrehen konnten. Wieder standen sie sich gegenüber, Mann und Riese. Weiße Hand, du sagst. Da Janulfs Speer mit dem Fuß sicher festgeklemmt war, hatte es das Monster nicht eilig. Warum? Sie nennen dich so, kleiner Rimmersmann. Das wirst du nicht verstehen, nicht sofort jedenfalls. Und ich bin gar nicht in Rimmersgard geboren, sondern in Nakiga selbst. Die rissigen Lippen schürzten sich verächtlich. Du nicht. Igdaya, du nur Mensch. Du denkst, Burjokar, dumm. dein Problem ist nicht, dass du dumm bist, sagte Janulf. Dein Problem ist, dass du bereits tot bist. Janulf blickte abwärts. Gleich darauf tat es auch das Monster. An dem Griff in Janulfs Hand funkelten ein paar Zoll einer silbrigen Klinge im Sternlicht. Der Rest war bereits tief in den Bauch des Monsters gedrungen. Es ist sehr lang, dieses Messer. So lang, dass mich kein Blut befleckt. Darum trage ich den Namen Weiße Hand. Aber mein Messer ist auch lautlos und scharf wie der Wind und kalt. Fühlst du schon, wie kalt es ist? So schnell, dass der Riese nur einmal blinzen konnte, packte Janulf den Messergriff mit beiden Händen, riss die Klinge von der Taille der Kreatur bis ans Brustbein hoch und drehte sie dabei. Das Ungeheuer heulte vor Verblüffung und Schmerz auf und schlug die riesigen Hände über die Wunde, während Janulf sich an ihm vorbeiwarf, den Griff seines langen Messers noch immer fest umklammert. Als er in die Mitte der Plattform taumelte, glitt die Klinge aus dem behaarten Leib des Riesen, gefolgt von Gedärm und Blut. Das Monster heulte noch einmal auf und hob dann die bluttriefenden Hände zu den fernen Sternen empor, als klage sie dafür an, dass sie so etwas zuließen. Als es mit heraushängenden Eingeweiden auf ihn zutorkelte, hatte Janulf seinen Speer wieder aufgehoben. Er hatte keine Zeit, den langen Speer umzudrehen, also packte er ihn nur fest und stürmte auf das Monster los. Er rammte das abgerundete Schaftende in das blutige Loch im Leib des Riesen, der vor Pein ohrend betäubend brüllte. Die zusammengebundenen Äste unter ihm wackelten und schwankten, und aus dem Geäst über ihn fielen Schneeklumpen herab, während der Riese heulte und wütete und am Speerschaft zerrte. Aber Janulf pflanzte die Beine fest auf und schob, über den Speer geduckt, das Schaftende tief in die inneren Organe des Monsters. Der Leichenriese taumelte rückwärts, die Arme wie Windmühlenflügel kreisend, das Maul, ein Loch, das zu groß für den Kopf schien, und verschwand dann plötzlich über den Rand der Plattform. Janulf hörte es im Fallen durch Äste brechen, hörte den dumpfen Aufschlag und dann nichts mehr. Janulf blickte hinab, hielt sich dabei am Rand der Plattform fest. Ihm war schwindlig und seine sämtlichen Muskeln zuckten. Der Riese lag am Fuß des Baums, ein Wirrwarr von überlangen Gliedmaßen. Janulf konnte durchs Geäst nicht allzu genaues erkennen, sah aber, wie sich unter dem behaarten Etwas eine schwarze Lache im Schnee ausbreitete. Leichtsinnig, schalt er sich selbst, und es hätte dich fast das Leben gekostet. Dafür kann Gott nicht stolz auf dich sein. Aber die Worte des Monsters hatten ihn schockiert. Konnte der Riese gelogen haben? Aber warum? Er hätte doch keinen Grund dazu gehabt. Die silberne Königin sei erwacht. Das hat er gesagt. Und deshalb erwache der ganze Norden. Das würde allerdings erklären, warum die Riesen jetzt bis nach Rimmersgard herabkamen. Und es würde auch die Gerüchte erklären, die Janulf gehört hatte, von Hekedaya-Kriegern, die an Orten gesichtet worden seien, wo man jahrelang keine mehr gesehen hatte. Er sah von der Plattform hinab, bis es ihm sicher erschien, dass der Riese tot war und seine eigenen Gliedmaßen nicht mehr zitterten. Dann warf er den Speer über den Rand und machte sich an den Abstieg. Der Wind wurde stärker, brachte jetzt Schnee von Norden her, und als er auf dem Boden anlangte, war Janulf weiß bestäubt. Er wischte das Blut und die Eingeweidespuren von seinem Speer und trennte dann mit seinem langen, scharfen Messer den Riesen den Kopf ab. Er setzte den Kopf in eine tiefe Astgabel des Bestattungsbaums. Die schwarzen Augen waren erloschen und in letzter Verblüffung aufgerissen. Das scharfzahnige Maul stand dümmlich offen. Er hoffte, der Kopf würde anderen Riesen eine Warnung sein, den Menschensiedlungen fernzubleiben, sich leichtere Beute zu suchen als die Leichen von Rimmersleuten. Aber die Toten zu schützen war jetzt nicht seine Hauptsorge. Wir Menschen haben die Königin-Hexe zurückgeschlagen und besiegt. Er sprach zu sich selbst so leise, dass ihn kein anderes Wesen, kein Vogel und kein Eichhörnchen hören konnte. Wenn sie wirklich zurückgekehrt ist, werden sie diesmal Menschen wie ich vernichten. Doch Janulf hatte sich und Gott schon öfter Dinge gelobt, und es hatte sich jedes Mal als leeres Versprechen erwiesen. Nein, spar deine Worte für Passenderes, sagte er zu sich. Beten zum Beispiel. Janulf, die weiße Hand, schulterte den langen Speer und machte sich auf den Rückweg in den Teil des verschneiten Waldes, wo er sein Pferd zurückgelassen hatte.
Das war also das Gespräch mit einem Leichenriesen, wie das Kapitel heißt. Ich würde vorschlagen, dass wir gleich nahtlos weitermachen mit dem Sebastian Barwinek, den ich jetzt hier vorne begrüße. Und dafür stehe ich auch mal ganz kurz auf. Herzlich willkommen. Sebastian, du bist Singer-Songwriter, Folkmusiker und hast einige von den Liedern vertont, die in den Büchern von Ted Williams vorkommen. Aber erzähl doch mal vielleicht ganz kurz nur, bevor du loslegst, warum eigentlich?
Ja, das war wie die sprichwörtliche Jungfrau zum Kinde. Ich habe das gelesen, nachdem mir irgendwie viel zu viele Leute gesagt hatten, ich soll das jetzt endlich mal lesen. Fand es sehr gut und die Lieder da drin haben irgendwie einfach da war direkt eine Verbindung da. Und dementsprechend dachte ich, warum versuche ich das nicht mal? Ich hatte schon vorher mal Gedichte vertont, aber bisher noch nichts Vergleichbares.
Und was bekommen wir jetzt zu hören?
Ich habe 2 Lieder mitgebracht. Das eine ist das erste, was ich vertont habe. Das stammt aus Two Green Angel Tower, also dem letzten Teil der alten Trilogie. Oder im Deutschen im 4. Band. Und das heißt In Cathan Dare by Silver Sea. Und das zweite, das war dann sozusagen nahtlos ein Wunsch von einigen der Osten Ard Leute, die gesagt haben, oh, das ist so schön, mach doch mal bitte den River Song. Das ist in Drachenbein-Thron eine recht prägnante Szene, wo sie auf dem Fluss im Althort unterwegs sind und Miriamel dieses Lied singt. Und die beiden habe ich euch mitgebracht.
Dann sind wir sehr gespannt.
Ich auch.
In Cathan there lived a maid in Cathan by Silver Sea. The fairest girl was ever born, and I loved her and she loved me. The silver sea, the winds are cold, the grass is long, the stones are old. And hearts are bold and love is old, and time the same tale told. In Cruel Cathan Dare, we met when autumn moon was high, and Cathan Dare by Silver Sea. In silver dress and golden shoon, she danced and gave her smile to me. When winter's ice was on the roof in Cathan Dare by Silver Sea, we sang beside the fiery hearth. She smiled and gave her lips to me. The silver sea, the winds are cold, the grass is long, the stones are old. And hearts are bold and love is old, and time the same tale told. In Cruel Cathan Dare, when spring was dreaming in the field in Cathan Dare by Silver Sea, in Mercury's shrine where candles burned, she stood and pledged her trust to me. And summer burned upon the hill in Cathan Dare by Silver Sea. Bands were posted in the town, but she came not to marry me. The silver sea, the winds are cold, the grass is long, the stones are old. And hearts are bold and love is old, and time the same tale told. In Cruel Cathan Dare, when autumn's moon had come again in Cathan Dare by Silver Sea, I saw her dance in silver dress, the man she danced for was not me. winter showed its cruel claws in Catherine there by Silver Sea. I walked out from the city walls, no more will that place torment me. The Silver Sea, the winds are cold, the grass is long, the stones are old. Hearts are bored and love is sold, and time, the same tale told. In cruel Catherine dear, the Silver Sea, the winds are cold, the grass is long, the stones are old. And hearts are bored and love is sold, and time, the same tale told. In cruel Catherine dear.
So, zum Abschied eine etwas fröhlich klingendere Nummer.
Those who sail the big pond will tell you of its mystery. They brag of all those battles and all the bloody history. They talk to any riverman who sails upon the glen he went. He say God made the ocean, but the river's what he really meant. Oh, the ocean is a question, but the river is the answer. With a rollicking and frolicking as fine as any dancer. But hell will take the shirkers, for this old boat won't carry them. And if we lose some crew or two, we'll drink to them at merriment. Some men go away to sea and never seen again. But every day we river dogs are found down at the end. And some may say we drink a bit or punch it up a mite. But when the river is your lady, it's just how you rest at night. Oh, the ocean is the question, but the river is the answer. With a rollicking and frolicking as fine as any dancer. Hell will take the shirkers, for this old boat won't carry them. And if we lose some crew or two, we'll drink to them at merriment. For the ocean is the question, but the river is the answer. With the rollicking and frolicking as fine as any dancer. But hell will take the shirkers, for this old boat won't carry them. And if we lose some crew or two, we'll drink to them at merriment, and merriment, and merriment. We'll drink to them at merriment. And if we don't spy them floating by, it'll save the penny to bury them. Vielen Dank.
Vielen Dank, Sebastian Bawinek. Ist der Name richtig ausgesprochen? Amazing, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I feel surrounded by talent. Why am I even here? I could just let you guys do this and I'll go back to California. No, it was great. And Barbara's reading as well was fabulous also. I didn't get a chance to say that also.
Absolutely.
Das war sehr, sehr schön. So, thank you both.
Now, as the evening is progressing, and I guess
As
Yeah.
evenings have a tendency to do.
Yeah, sadly. And there are lots of questions from the audience, I could imagine. But one more question before we will open up a bit. We were just been listening to music, and you've been an idiot once.
Yeah. I've been an idiot a long time, but I think you're talking about the band. So.
What band? No, I'm kidding, of course.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, when I was younger, actually writing was something that I only started doing when I was in my mid-20s. Before that, I was going to be, I hoped to be either an artist, or I played in a band, I did radio, I did theater. So my idea was basically I was not fit for normal work, so I had to find something creative that I could do. And so yes, my friends and I had a band, and it was called Idiot. And we were kind of on the cusp between the end of the glitter rock era and just before the punk era. And we were very theatrical, and we were sort of Dadaist, you know. So we used to do very strange things. We would appear as our own opening act. You know, so we would make up entirely new personas for ourselves and be completely different people, and oftentimes say bad things about ourselves as well. Yeah, but I'm still playing with those people.
Really?
Now, yeah, absolutely. We just changed our name. You know, I mean, like, we have no shame, so, you know, we just keep doing what we do, and every now and then we change the name to, again, as I mentioned earlier tonight, to evade legal responsibility and tax issues. No, we never make any money, so there are never any tax issues. But yeah, no, so the band that I play with now, which is mostly the same people, we are called Savage Roger. And don't worry if it doesn't make any sense to you. It makes sense to us, and we mostly are doing this to amuse ourselves and irritate the next door neighbors where we practice. We're on Spotify, yes. If you actually want to hear what our music sounds like, you can actually, it's on iTunes. You can go on iTunes and listen to some samples and stuff. We're just kind of a strange garage rock band.
Sounds wonderful. But do you think you would have made a good rock star?
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, if what is required to be a good rock star is a never-ending sense of self-importance, then I got that one nailed. You know, I'm there. No, what I love is I love to make things, but I also love to meet people and to perform. It's one of the really nice things about coming out on a tour, because when you're writing, not only are you by yourself, but you're actually working on things that you won't get a response to sometimes for a year or a year and a half. But when I get to go out, I actually have that reaction. Yeah, but because all the early things I did had very immediate, you know, reactions. I was doing theater, and you have an audience. I was playing music, an audience. A call-in radio show, you have an audience. You know, so I miss that sometimes. I really like people, and when I'm on my own, when I am alone for too long, things get a little spooky. So every now and then I have to leave the house like ein Dach, is it the badger, you say? The ducks?
Ducks?
Yeah, like, you know, come crawling up out of the ground and sort of look around and realize there's more than just dirt, you know, and then hurry back under again.
That's a great summary of being a successful author. Thanks for that. And thanks, vielen Dank Ihnen bis zu diesem Punkt fürs Zuhören. Ich würde ab diesem Punkt einfach mal die Klappe halten und quasi den Stab ans Publikum reichen. Also wenn es Fragen aus dem Publikum gibt, können wir das jetzt sehr, sehr gerne machen. Wie gesagt, es gibt Fragen noch für die LovelyBooks-Leute. Wir können es auch gerne mischen oder mal mit denen starten, aber ab dem Punkt sage ich einfach mal vielen Dank erstmal fürs Zuhören und jetzt können Ihre Fragen kommen.
Who are we clapping for? Who are we clapping for? For you. Oh. Yeah! I was afraid we were clapping for me, so I didn't want to start, you know, going, yeah!
Thank you, Ted.
Okay.
Okay, Fragen aus dem Publikum. Hier vorne?
Historical novel about 18th dynasty Egypt many years ago. And I'd love to go back to that. And I have other ideas. But also at the same time, as I often say, there is a certain responsibility when you are a father and a pet owner. Not really. We are not the owners, as many people who have pets knows. We are more like we are the farm laborers, you know, who bring them their food and exercise them. But there are certain responsibilities, so I also have to keep writing the books that I know will sell and that people want to read. But I hope to be able to occasionally write stranger things. Very strange things. Extremely strange things, I don't know. But yeah, there are other things I would like to try.
Dann nehmen wir doch mal eine von Lovely Books.
We had a number of people asking about your inspiration and ideas. So can you maybe tell us where they come from? If there are any books that you read that inspired you, or if you have like a playlist that you listen to that gives you ideas.
Interestingly enough, I've never actually read any books. You know, I just figured, you know, who the hell needs to read them just to write them? You know, it can't be that hard. No, actually, that is not true. Nicht wahr. No. No, I love books. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family of readers, and so they were around me all my young life. I was read to. My parents read to me. I read very early. So honestly, it's a list that goes from Winnie the Pooh to Thomas Pynchon. You know, it's kind of like pretty broad what I love. I was very affected, of course, by The Lord of the Rings, which I think I read when I was probably about 11. And I read that before The Hobbit, which explains something about these massive things that I write. But I also was very fascinated by, say, Ray Bradbury, the American science fiction writer, because of his use of language, which even as a young child I could recognize was something special. And I discovered other interesting people as I went along, including some nonfiction writers like Barbara Tuchman and Dickens and Charles Dickens and Jane Austen, and many, many science fiction and fantasy writers, almost too many to mention. But for me, like with everything else, I tend to be kind of all over the place. You know, I like some kinds of things from over here. I like some crime novels, but I like some literary fiction. But I also like journalism, and I like history and science, and I like mainstream, but I also like mysteries, and, you know, so kind of all over the place. I read a lot of Agatha Christie when I was young. And I'm sure that somewhere in the back of my mind, that is part of the process, too, of trying to lead people along into things and then dropping them off a cliff with a surprise. So yeah, books were always been a huge influence. Music, I can't even always judge how music has influenced me, because I think for me, it is a big part of my writing. When I think about writing, it is often in a very musical way. I feel things the way I do with music quite often. I feel the need for a faster pace here, you know, where we go a little more obligato or something. And, you know, there are certain beats that I feel that have to happen, and themes that weave in and out. And it oftentimes feels very much like I'm making a piece of music, and I'm sort of feeling it rather than thinking about it, at least as far as the structure. But even within the writing itself, because I know the translators did a very good job with the Hexenholzkrone, I know that at least you can get a feeling that I do like language, and I try for a kind of musical feeling with language where it moves up and down, and you get little bursts of things that suddenly startle you. And so also music is very important because, as I mentioned earlier, it deadens the sound of my children. This is crucial. This is an absolute must. I cannot write without being able to shut the sound of our teenagers with their very loud video games and their very loud conversations. And God bless them. They are wonderful young people, and they're so much fun, but they are really freaking loud. So, especially our son, who he has no interest in it, but I mean, he could be an opera singer or something because he has just got a voice. Sometimes Deborah and I are out walking way far away from our house, and we can hear our son's voice just thundering through the trees from back inside, you know. So you have to really work to not hear people at our house, and dogs, and, you know, everything. So I also use music as a practical thing. I use music without lyrics, like ambient or classical or some jazz, to shut myself off from the world. Because if I listen to things with lyrics, like this happened once with Elvis Costello. I was listening to Elvis Costello, and then I go back to writing my fantasy novel, and the whole fantasy novel begins to read like Elvis Costello song lyrics, which was interesting, but weird.
Being the father of a 12-year-old son who talked like Binnabik to us for about half a year, how do you cope with fandom and people sort of implementing your stuff into their philosophy and life?
I love it. I mean, how could you not? How could anybody who likes to make things and to share them with people, how could you not love that? That somebody is either just enjoying it themselves or they bring it back to you in some fashion. It's like Sebastian's wonderful songs, you know, and when they started out, they were just kind of bits of doggerel poetry that I wrote in a book, you know, and he's put this wonderful music to it and arranged it and sings it so well, and anything like that is incredibly exciting for me. I am not the kind of writer who would write books even if nobody read them. I am ashamed to say it. I am not that pure of an artist that I would write books just to know I had written them and keep them, you know, in my closet. No, I want to share. You know, I come from a background of performing, but even more than that, I like to make things and bring them to people. So that kind of thing is wonderful to me. You know, whether it's people writing fan fiction, or whether it is people doing musical things with mine, or using characters of mine to describe things, or, you know, there was I remember somebody who did a high-speed server for, you know, computer server, and called it Storm King and said, you know, this is after Tad Williams' Otherland, and I thought that was the coolest thing, you know. I couldn't afford one myself. It's a big old, very powerful computer, but I still thought it was great. So yeah, I love that. And so your son used to talk like Binnabik? That is so cool. It's annoying afterwards. I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure. Well, I apologize for that, but please tell him that I am having great pleasure at hearing about this thing that he was at doing. So.
Gehen wir wieder zurück zur LovelyBooks-Gemeinde.
You've touched upon this a little bit already, but since we had a number of people asking, I'm going to ask it again. Are you a big planner when it comes to your books? And have you usually got an outline of your entire novel before you start writing, or the entire series in this case?
Well, there's two different factors involved here. One is that yes, and there is a need for some outlining, and I will explain that in a second. But also because of the way that the publishing business works. Publishers, if you just walk in and say, hey, I've got an idea, give me a lot of money, strangely, they are not all that excited. You know, they want to actually see you prove to them that you have a new idea. And so we have to write outlines when we go to our publishers and sell a new book. I hate it. I seriously hate it, because it is forcing me to put together some version of the story way too early. in a very inorganic way, where I'm solving problems not by kind of absorbing them and living with them, but just kind of looking at it and going, and then they do this, and then they do this, and then I'm thinking, what next now? Oh, and then they do this. And I don't like that. But because of the kind of books that I write, namely that I write these multi-volume stories that I want them for the reader to be like a single book, so that if you wait until they all come out, please don't wait until they all come out. We will die. Our family will die. We will be very sad. And then the rest of them won't come out, see? So you have to work with me. Anyway, if you sat down with all of the Dragonbone Chair, Stone of Farewell to Green Angel Tower, it pretty much reads like all one story. There's no big break or anything. The problem, though, is because you are writing the third book when the first book or two have already been published. So it's too late to fix things. If you make a serious mistake, you are screwed, is one of the things we say in America. We say other things too, but that will do for tonight and for a mixed audience of people and science fiction readers. See, mixed audience, not, never mind. Okay. So anyway, I love to plan at least enough that I can put clues in at the beginning of the story and foreshadow and begin the themes and know a little of what will happen at the ending, even when I'm beginning, so I can do all of that. So I can make the first book so it connects to the end of the story. However, 5 or 6 years to write a big series, things happen, I discover things, the characters become more real to me, and I have to let them show me things I didn't know about them, and that takes time too. So I can't figure everything out at the beginning. It's just not possible. So it is always a balance. It is always holding up both sides, the knowing as much as you can, but leaving a lot of room to discover things as you go. And I don't think there is any hard and fast rule. You just do the best you can to keep a balance between the two.
All right.
No, I get into that mode, and I was going to say questions, and I realized, no, Bjorn is here. He can do it.
You have a showmaster
That's
tonight.
his job, and he has the right shoes for it and everything, and
Really, do I?
you do.
That's great.
Those are moderator's shoes. There's no question.
Gerne noch eine Frage aus dem Publikum, je nach Länge der Antwort auch noch 2, aber das sehen wir dann. Einmal da drüben, ja?
Hey, you were telling us about your experience as an actor when you were playing Smaug, and while you were reading from your book, you made pretty wild gestures, you know. So my question is about your process of writing when you're writing an action scene. So does it all happen in your head, or
do I run around in
your office and swinging with your stick and yeah?
I am totally ashamed that I should even have led you to ask that. Do I jump around like an idiot when no one's watching? Oh God, it's probably true, but I wouldn't admit it anyway. No, I am it's in my head. This is one of the reasons that I spend such a long period of time horizontal every day, just lying there thinking, playing, because for me, it's only when I'm sitting down to write, after thinking first, that I actually know what's happening. Before that, I am having many exercises. I am spending a lot of time trying many different possibilities. That's why I do it in my head. It's much faster. You know, you say, click, 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 click. Nah, take the bottom part, click over here, and go click, click, click. You know, and you're just putting different strands or strings together of things and mixing and matching, and if it doesn't work, you just mentally throw it all out and start over. And for me, that's much easier to do. As soon as I start either trying to act it out or trying to write it down or write it on my screen, it becomes more real, and it is harder to throw it away if it's bad, you know? So in my head, it all works much more quickly. So, but yes, as you noticed, I do like to jump around. You were actually all very lucky, because since I didn't have something to put my book on tonight, you didn't get my extremely florid and exciting operatic gestures that I usually make when I'm reading. So it's terrifying, believe me. You're all extremely lucky. But so yes, I do have that very strong streak in me of liking to act things out and do voices and stuff like that.
Dann schlage ich vor, dass wir noch eine Frage von LovelyBooks nehmen, weil danach wird Ted noch signieren und da bestimmt auch noch die eine oder andere Frage aus dem Publikum beantworten. Und das ist den Leuten bei LovelyBooks noch nicht möglich, weil Beamen noch nicht erfunden wurde. Also noch eine Frage von LovelyBooks und dann...
Okay, here it comes. If you were to go on a trip to Osten Ard, what would you pack into your bag and why?
Well, do they make bags large enough for modern toilets? Because people always ask me, you know, wouldn't you love to live in your invented imaginary lands? And I always say to them, only when they install decent plumbing, you know? But no, what I love best about Osten Ard, of course, are the Scythy and the forests and the old cities and the crumbling remnants of old civilizations. Anyone who's read more than one of my books has seen that these themes run through everything I do. I am fascinated in the real world as well as in my writing with ancient civilizations that were lost and then found again. Underground journeys, forests in general were always a very important and we would say resonant in English. It resonates for me. So, you know, I think the first place I would want to go if I went there would be to some place like Jaui Tinukai or one of the old empty Scythy cities. Because I love things that are old and I love things that are historical and I love things that you can feel the magic of them just a little bit when you're there. So that's, I think, what I would do. What would I take with me? If I were a person who already lived there and didn't have to have special shots to prevent diseases and things like that, well, I would just take food and wine and an extra pair of shoes to do lots of walking, and maybe, if they were very lucky, some of my family. Not my wife, of course, because she's sitting right here and I have to go home with her tonight, so of course, my wife, yes, absolutely, absolutely. But maybe even a few children and one or two of the better behaved dogs. So.
Sure, that's your chance now. Damit wären wir am offiziellen Teil angekommen. Bevor Ted jetzt noch zum Signieren geht, möchte er noch ganz kurz was sagen.
So before we start the signing, I just wanted to say, first of all, thanks to Tobias and Dragon Days. Thanks very much to LovelyBooks. Thanks to the Stadtbibliothek, which is an amazing building, and I'm so thrilled to get to do something here. But most of all, thank you, readers, all of you who read books. We may not be the biggest group in the world, but by God, we are the best. So, thank you. And thank Björn. What an amazing guy. Drop microphone. So where are we signing? Over here. Cute little table. Oh, isolated to keep me out of trouble. music, pens,